What if Sherlock Holmes had supernatural powers? What if instead of investigating normal criminals, he investigated the supernatural? On this episode of the Formula Podcast, I got an opportunity to sit down with Jackaby author William Ritter. Jackaby is a story of a detective who investigates the supernatural, very much like a Sherlock Holmes type character. It's an amazing book series. It's a lot of fun to read. It's one of my favorites I've picked up, and it's available on Amazon or any of your other, any other bookstores online. Support your local indie bookstore if you can. In this conversation, we talk about his writing process, where the idea for Jackaby came from, and I don't know, all kinds of other stuff. He's a really good dude. I really enjoyed this conversation. I had a lot of takeaways from it, and I hope you do as well. So without me rambling on any further, let's get this show started with William Ritter. All right, so today I have the privilege of sitting down with writer Will Ritter. I had the opportunity to read his books, the Jackaby series, or what's the official name of the series? It's the
Jackaby works for the series. I may need to come up with something a little more expanded, as I've now got a second series, the Oddmeyer series, that takes part in the same universe. I don't know. I don't have a universe name yet. We'll get there someday.
Well, if you need some help brainstorming, I'm happy to throw you some ideas.
I'll look your way.
Yeah. So I as I was sharing with you before, Will, I was actually in the hospital in Vietnam when I started reading your books on my Kindle. And that, from what it sounds like, that's how most people discover Jackaby is
the natural conduit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I read the series. I fell in love with Jackaby and his story, and just really enjoyed your depiction of him as a supernatural Sherlock Holmes, and how, as a character, he really almost becomes more human. I mean, by the end, I don't want to spoiler alert or anything, but it's just a really amazing series, and I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to chat with you today. So, one of the questions I really have is, well, how did you? I mean, clearly you have a lot of talent when it comes to writing and storytelling, but what's your, I guess, origin story, or how did you get into writing yourself?
I don't have really a clean line between when I went from sort of making things up and writing poems and comics and things like I've been doing since I was a kid, to feeling like, I'm good enough now and people will pay me for this and they should pay me for this, and having that sort of confidence of an actual, a real author. In fact, I do read it right here. I've got some books on my shelf from when I was in elementary school. They're Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge and Batman Meets Prince, fully illustrated by yours truly, with some sweet illustrations there. Laminated in construction paper from back when I was in elementary school. So like things like this I've been doing forever. I've got little short stories and things that I have written throughout my life, and comics and poems and things. And at one point, I graduated college. I had a degree in English. I got certificates in creative writing and folklore, and I was waiting tables, because that's what you do with a degree in English and certificates in folklore. And I started writing this story. Actually, sort of the background behind Jackaby was that I had been teaching mythology and working with a fellow teacher who taught science, and he was doing a forensic science class, and we were talking about, wouldn't it be cool to do a class where we taught fiction about detectives and mysteries and murders, and then taught the forensics that kind of actually went behind that and how we would solve those in modern times. And I thought that was so cool. What a fun idea. This teacher was super fun and interesting. And so I started reading up on these, great classics. I was reading the Japan mysteries and the Sherlock mysteries and, Agatha Christie stories and things. And then that job stopped being a possibility. And so I had all these ideas bouncing around in my head, and my own, the mythology that I had been teaching. And sort of from that came this idea about this magical detective. And so having this idea in my head, started writing it, and I treated it exactly the same way I would treat, drawing a picture of a giraffe with a top hat or whatever. Like, it was a fun thing that I put some effort into, and I'm like, I got done, and I put it on the shelf, and it was my wife who was like, no, maybe let's take that off the shelf, and why don't you try pitching it and putting it out there? And so I did, and it was at the time that Hurricane Sandy was buffeting the East Coast, and things were blacking out all over the place, and so I sent this submission out, and again, weirdly, you were in the East when you discovered it. I was in Japan when I finished writing and started submitting, and so I was 16-hour time difference or so from New York, and then New York was blacking out. So I assumed all of these people that I was querying were probably either dead or definitely not interested in reading my silly story about a detective. And yet, when my 13th query, my lucky 13, got back to me, Lucy Carson, who continues to be my agent, and she reached out in the midst of this emergency. She had literally not reached running water yet when she got in touch with me. And she has represented the book ever since. She's done a stellar job. She gives me sort of good, sort of minor editorial advice for things that might sort of bring it up to snuff before submitting it. And then we were able to submit that first manuscript out to a handful of editors, and it went to auction, and I got a chance to work with Elise Howard, who I love. She's the editor at Algonquin Young Readers, and she is phenomenal. And so I'll continue selling her books as long as she's willing to buy them, and she's fantastic. So yeah, that was kind of the unexpected journey of starting to publish. Really came from just enjoying stories and enjoying writing, and having someone in my life who was there to say, maybe go further.
All right, I have a few questions from that. So
Yeah.
One is so you said something at the end that just gave me a second one, but the first one I have is, do you find that your best creative material comes from when you're just having fun and just kind of throwing something together without necessarily thinking like, I'm going to turn this into a bestseller? You know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah. To a degree, yeah. There's the two fields of thought on that. The two sort of contrary ideas are that you are either a plotter or a pantser, that you either come up with the sort of the bullet points and you know exactly where you're going and you have a really clean story, or you're a seat of your pants, sort of whatever happens, whatever comes next. And generally, when I go completely by the seat of my pants, it lacks structure and it's not as good. But if I try to stick to a really rigid structure, it gets dull and I just get bored. I wrote a blog about this years ago called F It Zombies that wound up being a part of The Dire King, in fact, the last book in the Jackaby series, which has zombies in it. No big spoiler there. But they were not in the original draft. They weren't in the outline that I got approved by my editor. They weren't in what I had been paid to write. But I was at a certain point in the manuscript where I was just like, I'm bored. Like I'm not enjoying this. I need to get from point C to point D, and I have no love or passion for it. And so I wrote a scene in which zombies showed up, and it was just more fun for me to write. And so I just got going again, and I love that scene. And then that emerged and became a better part of the story. So I think the best writing that I do, at least, and it may be true for other writers as well, comes when I have milestones marking my way up the mountain, but I let myself wander off the trail as much as I like, as much as I'm comfortable.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. It's like you have a trail, but you're not afraid to deviate from it a bit.
Yes, yeah. Get the poison ivy once in a while. It's worth it.
Oh, that sounds terrible. So the second question I had was, you were kind of talking about the stories that you pulled from, and what stories or books do you think influence you the most when it comes to your storytelling or writing?
Yeah, different stories in different ways. So I was reading, like I said, like Agatha Christie and Edgar Allan Poe and of course Arthur Conan Doyle as sort of like the foundations for what does a good detective story look like, and so that's why it's got the very Sherlockian pastiche. It's got that sort of those tropes are all in there. In fact, in the very first book, I intentionally made reference in the same way that Sherlock Holmes makes reference to Dupin. His very first story, Sherlock, it's Study in Scarlet. He drops a little sort of throwaway line about that Detective Dupin, I can do much more than he can. Basically, it's this throwaway line where he's saying like, yeah, I see that and I'm going to do better. And so I did a similar sort of line with Jackaby, talking about that detective at Scotland Yard, and he says, yeah, something like that. And so it's that sort of I'm acknowledging that I'm in this world, but I'm going to play in my own play box. And so from there, I kind of had the structures, but then the voice came from a lot of different things. I loved, when I was growing up, reading the Jeeves stories by P.G. Wodehouse. And he's got this just gorgeous approach to sort of metaphor and the ways that he frames things. I use his quotes all the time when I'm teaching about how to have sort of interesting voice and metaphor, that you can get these, like, the John Green sort of rolling metaphors of, like, if I was a match, then she was a bonfire, things like that. But with P.G. Wodehouse, you'll get things like, her face was shining like the seat of a bus driver's trousers. And it's this, like, hits you in the face with, she looked as if she had been poured into her dress and forgot to say when, and things like that, where you get these just fun ways of playing with language. And so I tried to work some of that into mine. I'm giving myself praise to say I'm even playing the same game as Woodhouse. But I tried to work a little of that into it. And then some of the sort of the ways that I play with mythology and the creatures and things that I've got in my world definitely are akin to Terry Pratchett. I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan, wrote the Discworld books. And just the ways in which, again, he is playful with his language, but the man is brilliant, and you can tell that he's clearly well-read and all over the place. He's not just, a typical genre sort of writer. He elevates, what he does to a tremendous degree. It makes me, again, praising myself just to say that I'm even in the same genre, writing fantasy the way that I do. So those are the kinds of things that I tried to echo when I was writing that kind of voice. Patricia Reedy similarly wrote the Dealing with Dragons books, the Enchanted Forest series, really fantastic stuff. And when I was a kid, that was the kind of, like, I liked the idea of, playing with all of these tropes. It's a story about a princess who winds up getting, sent off to the dragons because that's how you find a good husband. The prince who comes to murder your dragon is going to marry you. And she decides she likes the dragons a lot more, and those princes are a bunch of tools, so she'd rather hang out with the dragons. And so from there, you get this sort of playful world with, a magical forest and witches and things. And I don't know if I was actively thinking of that when I created Jackaby, but that is absolutely sort of the kinds of worlds that I like to create, where you take and celebrate the tropes and the things about it that you loved, but you sort of turn them on their head.
Yeah, I think from first glance at Jackaby, like what you said there, where you kind of almost have an expectation of, oh, it's just Sherlock Holmes, but with fantastic creatures, and then when you start getting into it, you're like, this is not quite the same thing at all. It's very, it has, like, you described it in a very good way there, where you have the tropes, but then you definitely deviate from the path in a surprising, delightful way.
I'm glad to hear you think so. Yeah. No. My Sherlock character, my Jackaby, is kind of the opposite of Sherlock in that he is much less likely to be a good detective. He said this. He's got a cheat. He's got the ability to see things that other people can't see, and so it's just like with anything. If you've been able to cheat, you don't have to build the muscles to do it yourself. And so his assistant, Abigail, who is his sort of, stalwart ally throughout the story, winds up being the one who's actually much more clever about things and needs to put pieces together in ways that he doesn't.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. And I'm curious, are you writing a series where Abigail is going to be the main character?
I have nothing under contract currently. That is definitely in the works in my head. Whether or not it ever becomes a reality, you should encourage Elise Howard to purchase that book sometime in the future. But I would love to come back. I would love to come back to New Fiddleham. Abigail is, of course, she's a fantastic character to write. I love writing her. I love writing Jackaby. I love writing that whole world of New Fiddleham. I love playing with those characters, and I'll come back to them eventually someday, whether or not it's exactly the same kind of a series or not.
Yeah.
Right now, I am about 100 miles away in a little town called Ensborough. So the town of the town of Ensborough, the story of the Oddmeyer, takes place in the same universe. And in fact, there's mention of New Fiddleham up the road and people who have visited Glanville and other things that are mentioned in the Jackaby series. So it takes place in the same world at about the same time. In fact, some of the events that happen in the Dire King influence the very beginnings of what's happening in Changeling. And so those characters are now sort of, I've finished my third, though that one's not out in the world yet, and that'll be sort of the end cap of that series. And then I'd love to, again, I love those characters as well, so we might see some sort of mixing of them, because it's easy enough to do in this shared universe.
Yeah, that's awesome. I could eventually see maybe, I'm trying to think of, is it like the Wheel of Time? They have like 40 books or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is that
Pratchett is much the same. Oh, sorry.
Is that the aim that you have? Is that your goal, is to have a long running series like that?
I would love to kind of play with something like that. I think I lean more toward, again, Terry Pratchett, who I'm a big fan of, and he's got sort of series that squish together rather than having one sort of continuous 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of series. So he'll have things like his cops, his sort of, his beat cop group are the Guard, and they're fun, and you can read sort of their stories and get into them. And then he'll have another story completely about this guy who's sort of a cheeky thief, and you'll see the same characters. In fact, that will be the character who's chasing you in this story, sort of the antagonist in this story, and there's the protagonist in that story. And so all of the characters kind of exist in the same worlds, and you can read just one. You can read just the witches, or just the wizards, or just the cops, or just the thief. Or you can read them all as they come out. And so it's kind of, I like that idea of having kind of a universe of, familiar faces. It's like coming home, and you can go, oh yeah, I like that guy. Oh, her, oh, she's fun. So I'd love to have maybe something like that eventually. But again, he's got 40, 50, 60 books out there. I don't know how many Pratchett books are out there in the world.
Yeah, it's
it'll be a while.
I just remember going to the library and seeing all of them like stacked next to each other, and it's very intimidating to get started in that. I can't imagine being the writer on looking at that though and being like,
oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard people like Stephen King, who's kind of famous for cranking out like a book during a bathroom visit, like this sort of like constant prolific book writing. And there's books that he looks back and he's like, I don't remember writing that. And some of that is because he was doing some interesting chemicals at the time. But some of it really is just he's cranked out so many of those. They're like, he would be surprised to read it and see what's inside it because he does not remember them. I don't think I'll ever quite get there.
To put out that much work would just be unreal. Did you always want to be a writer? Was that kind of your dream as a kid growing up?
I liked the idea. I mean, I thought of it, I think, in the same way that I thought of, like, I want to be an actor and I want to be a fireman. Like, it was one of those, like, it was a cool thing that would be fun to do. I don't know that I ever fully took it seriously. I went to school not knowing at all what I wanted to do with my future. And so I became an English major because I liked stories and I liked reading and I liked getting into that. And now I'm an English teacher, which is the natural thing to do with that. And I love teaching, but I didn't know that I was going to be an English teacher when I was starting out either. It was just sort of finding the excuse to do the things that I liked doing. But I knew I wanted to be creative in some way. And I guess in the back of my mind, in a big way, I always sort of assumed that would be, I'd work the desk job and I'd work in the office and I'd file papers or whatever. And then I'd come home and do my creative things. And that would be super cool. And like having a hobby. So the fact that I can get paid to do it is just cherry on top.
Yeah. It sounds like everybody's dream is to like get paid to do something they love. So
yeah,
it worked out for you, it seems like.
Not too shabby. Yeah. Keep doing it as long as they keep paying me.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. I mean, I'm looking forward to whatever comes out next. I actually haven't read the next series, so I will definitely see. My issue though is when I start reading something, it's like I'm very addictive to the story, and I'm like, I want to know how it ends.
You want to cruise through the end, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of who wrote Game of Thrones.
George R. Martin.
Yeah. I'm like, George, finish the books, man. Come on,
right?
You got to be better than the TV series at least. Let's go.
Whew, yeah, this takes time.
Yeah. I feel like I have a lot of conversations with people about if they could do anything, and what would they do? And one of the answers a lot of people say is, well, I'd write fiction, or I would be a writer of some sort or something. And I'm assuming in your role, you probably get a lot of students who ask you how they can do that, or people will ask you how they can write or be a writer as well. What would you tell someone that comes up and says, basically, Will, I want to be a writer at some point. How do I get there? What do I do?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, it's one of those fun things that is impossible until it's not. And then it's just a reality. And so for me, when I was getting started, it was important to justify taking the time to do it, because that's, I think, one of the biggest things holding people back is, like, I was teaching and everyone else, you got a job, got that thing that you need to do in order to put food on your table and all that. And you wind up feeling guilty about the things that, like, this is like me, watching soap opera or something. Like, this is me, my guilty pleasure is writing this story. And you need to sort of shift that and allow yourself to feel like this is something that you can do and that you should be doing. And honestly, I mean, it's cheaper than therapy and it's cheaper than writing seminars, and you learn a lot, and it can be cathartic in the same ways as both of those. So there's lots of ways that you can justify, and then you find the times to do it. You give yourself, an hour a day, or you give yourself, I'm going to work, 4 hours over, the weekend or something like that. You give yourself those little chunks and forgive yourself the times when you're not. There's lots of things that bounce around, the sort of bumper sticker kinds of quotes of saying things like, if you're not writing, you're not a writer. And that's a load of crap, because there's plenty of writers who spend months and months and months not writing and then hammer something out quickly. And there's other writers who write half an hour a day because that's what they can do and that's what they put in. And it doesn't matter. By the end, it's if you're able to finish something, if you're able to keep working on it, if you're able to keep maintaining that passion, then you're doing it right, and that's fine. So yeah, finding the time to justify sort of for yourself, finding the time to do it, and allowing yourself the time to do it. Another one, my go-to phrase when I'm talking to students in particular is write garbage, edit gold. That you need to be willing to just get it out there and let it be crap the first draft. Love it, have fun with it, write, F it zombies, have fun with what you're doing, but let it be something that you might not keep, let it be stuff that you might not love. And it's sort of like dragging that, lump of clay to the table. You can't mold it unless you've got the clay, so you've got to get that rough draft there. And then you need to edit. And so the idea that a lot of my students have, I wrote it once, I shouldn't have to write it again, like you got to get that out of your head. You wrote it once, that's the clay. Like that's good, that's a great first step, but now the real fun can actually be in editing and playing with it. So, if you put something out on submission and people don't want it, that's not necessarily the end and the death of that story. A, you should be working on the next story and the next story and the next. And B, that one story might just need some smoothing and some tweaking and some adjusting, and then it can be the next thing. So learning to love the editing process, which is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
That's definitely part of it as well.
It reminds me of I'm not sure if it's Anne or Annie Lamott. She wrote the book Bird by Bird.
Oh, okay. I've heard of the book. I haven't read.
Yeah, there's the rule of shitty first drafts. It's like just write something awful and then fix it.
100%. Yep.
Is there anything that you do? So like let's say you're working on your next story. How do you set up your environment so you feel like you're able to write? Are you just someone that you pop open your laptop and you crank stuff out no matter where you're at, or do you have like I take my notebook and I go sit outside somewhere and I have my special coffee, and how does that work for you?
Different ways for different books, I guess. I like to do scene studies and things I like, typing on a typewriter if I can. I've got a handful pen over to my little green typewriter hanging out with
you have a Mandalorian.
With my Mandalorian and Grogu hanging out with each other over there.
Yeah.
And I've got actually up here, this princess. She's a Royal 10 from 1919. She's a lovely typewriter. So I've got a few of those around, and I really like. There's a different feeling when you're typing on a typewriter than when you're on a computer. Again, there's that sort of less pressure to go back and edit each line 7 times because you can't without busting out the whiteout. So instead, you kind of let yourself just write a first draft, which is for me when I'm doing just sort of character studies and I'm just sort of exploring the world a little bit is really nice. So I've got big old stacks of paper of those that have gone into several of my books. Once I get past that point, that once I really am at the sort of creating an active draft that I want to be working on, I tend to do that on a computer because I like to be able to edit and go back. I work on a Mac and I hate Word for Mac. I really hope you're not sponsored or anything, but I hate Word for Mac because it crashes on me whenever I'm doing a really large project, especially with comments all throughout. It kills the whatever thing is running that program. So I tend to do more of my stuff. I've got Scrivener now, which I love. Scrivener has been working really nicely for me, but of course it doesn't share with anyone else. So I can't just send it on an email in Scrivener, so I have to then translate it to Word for Mac. I've used lots of different programs like that. But generally, I do most of my writing on a computer. I like to have a relatively quiet space. I've got some noise-canceling headphones, especially like right now we're all in quarantine. I've got 2 kids at home and life happening around me. It's not their fault. So having something to kind of cancel out that noise is good. And then I also, I've got whiteboards around me, and I like to do the crazy person, beautiful mind thing of having lots of different, things connected and lines connecting them. And I've even done the threads and the connected things on a corkboard kind of thing. Because I'm a very visual thinker. And so being able to see, okay, that chapter leading to that chapter, I'm going to add something here and leave a note for myself that needs to go in, that sort of thing. So I like having those sort of all around me, and then the draft itself on the computer so I can plug away.
Oh, that's cool. That's that was making me laugh when you're doing the detective board with the pinups and everything.
Very much.
Trying to. I'm going to edit this part out. I'm just thinking out loud about it's the beauty of having a editor. Things can be fixed when they're not so good.
This was all seamless. I'll hold perfectly still until you're back.
Yeah, sounds good. Don't move. All right. I guess I'm thinking through what other questions I want to know, because I'm enjoying hearing about your writing process, but I'm also For some reason, I have this question stuck in my head that it has nothing to do with writing or any of this stuff. A friend of mine, Katie, we can edit this out, or if you don't want to discuss this question, it's fine.
This is fun.
She called me up. She's from the UK. She does some writing and travel vlogging. She's super cool. She's by herself. She's done something like 500 dives around the world, like deep sea diving.
Yeah.
And then she's done like snowboarding camps in Slovenia alone and all kinds. She's awesome. She was working on this project. She called me and she was like, what does it mean to you to be in love? And I was like, oh shit. I don't know. So I kind of want to, because you're a writer, I kind of want to get a writer's response to that question. Are you comfortable?
Sure. Yeah.
That? Okay.
I put an answer to that in Dire King, actually. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers for anyone there, but there's a moment where a character genuinely believes that she has sort of lost the person that she was supposed to be with, and she kind of gets posed to her like, are you going to do the very romantic thing of sort of following this person into hell? Are you going to sort of do the romantic, I can't live without him kind of thing? And her response is, all respect to Romeo and Juliet and everything, but you don't lose yourself in love. You find yourself there, that you can allow yourself to be made better by love and the people that genuinely love you, as opposed to the sort of manipulative sort of lust kind of love. People who genuinely love you want to bring out the best in you and want to make you the best. And especially when I work with teenagers a lot, and you get a lot of that that's the Romeo and Juliet age, where it's very easy to feel romantic and want to just sort of throw away everything that that there is about me in order to love you. And that's where you get the sort of the Bella Swan characters, where it's like, I will give up all of my life 100% in order to be with this person that I don't really know anything about. And while that seems very romantic on the outset, it's not really love unless you know who you are and what it is that you're giving up first. And being with that person should bring that out more. It should let you be more yourself than you were. And that's definitely been true for me. My wife is absolutely the sort of the best inspiration for me. She's the person who brings out the sort of the best in me. She's a fantastic storyteller. She's got a great mind for stories herself. So she's always my first editor. She's always the first person I talk to about ideas, and I bounce things back and forth. And so she definitely makes me feel like more me, and hopefully I do the same for her. I try and support her in her efforts as well, make her the most her that she is. So yeah, you can sort of, you find yourself in love when you really love somebody truly.
That's a great answer. Now, I know we didn't intend to talk about this at all. That was awesome. How long have you and your wife been married for? Not to get too much into your personal life or anything. But...
Yeah, no, it's good. About 15 years. Yeah.
Okay. Oh man. Do you remember how you guys met?
Yeah, technically we were in middle school together. We didn't fully know each other, but we grew up in a small town called Aloha, and yeah, we went to middle. We were both in the Sword in the Stone at one point, and I played Merlin and she played Lady Evil. So we thoroughly did not know each other in spite of being on stage with each other back in middle school. But then in high school, we were still in theater. We were theater kids, and she was dating a jerk who was like really manipulative, and like his whole approach was like, oh, you can't hang out with other guys because I'm your boyfriend, so I'm the only person you can be with. And then when she was with him, he was just a jerk to her, like just a bad dude. And so I flat out told her, like, you should maybe dump him and date me instead. And eventually she took me up on that. It was delightful. We have a mutual friend who's still a good friend of ours. He's married himself now. But at the time he had said, like, dang, you're like, I was waiting in the wings, and man, I tell you, if you screw up, I'm right there. And like, fair enough, sir. You go right ahead. Like, if I screw up, you take your chance. But no, she and I started dating in high school, and then she's a year ahead of me in high school, and so she went off to the University of Oregon before I did, and I sort of followed her over there. And yeah, we've been together ever since. We did the college thing and lived in a terrible apartment for 3 or 4 years, and eventually, like, we're now a little more stable and feeling a little more comfortable, and we got two boys of our own now. So yeah, living the dream.
That's awesome. Congratulations. It sounds like it sounds like it's a good story. And part of it, I'm like, yeah, you should have your wife listen to this. This sounds like you might get some brownie points for.
We'll see.
No, that's just from your answer about, what what does love mean? I guess that I was curious. So 2020 has been a pretty I know that look. That means oh shit. 2020 has been kind of a tough year for a lot of folks out there. I mean, it's been a kind of a disaster for a lot of people. And I guess if you had any, for folks out there that are having a tough time that are listening to this, any words of inspiration or a story that comes to mind that might help them maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, things do get better. I mean, that's always part of it. The pendulum does swing back, which is good to keep in mind. But also, I don't know that I would even push to feeling good yet for a lot of people right now. Just right now, the anger and the fear and the frustration are valid. Just letting yourself be, mad at the things in your life that you should be mad at, and letting yourself be frustrated about your situation, letting yourself be sad. There are a lot of people out there who are, especially if you're single and stuck in an apartment or something like that, like you'd have nobody. I've got at least my wife and my kids who are keeping me company, who are having fun, and there's plenty of people who don't have that. I'm privileged in so many ways. And so I think anything coming from me saying, keep your chin up and buck up and things will be great would come out as a little bit hollow to people who are in different situations. That your own situation, your own feelings around it are absolutely valid, and let yourself be miserable once in a while. Especially this time of year is that time anyway, where like it's the most wonderful time of the year. Like it's not for a lot of people. It's genuinely not. So let it be not, and that's okay. And know that it will get better. That the seasons change and the pendulum swings and all that good stuff. But it's okay to be miserable.
Yeah, that's actually. I can't imagine what it'd be like throughout this whole time to be in an apartment by myself. I mean, I was fortunate enough to I came home from being overseas and was visiting a friend, and then they're like, everything is shut down, and I was just like, can I stay with you? Is that okay? Thankfully, he's a really awesome guy. He'd been dating his girlfriend for about a month, and then they're like, so do you just kind of want to like hang out here until this is so like we're all just hanging out on the couch for like 3 months, just being like, oh, fascinating stuff, huh? And I'm very thankful I had those people there though, because being in a different situation would have been very tough. And I think that I liked what you said about a lot of people have a very good reason to feel not so great right now, and here's hoping to a better light at the end of the tunnel, whatever it is. But I've pretty much run through most of my questions. I mean, I feel like I could talk all day about the Jackaby and all the different. Oh, there is one question. So, all right, this is if you're going to read the book and you don't want to know how it ends, then you should probably shut this off right now. But at the end of Dire King is the 4th book, right?
Yes.
And Charlie is the werewolf. Or use a different term, but
Uncanny, technically, which is badly grammatically incorrect Romanian for basically a were-human here, a were-dog.
Yep. Yeah, and so at the end of, towards the end of Dire King, he dies in the fight, and then he is brought back, right, by the, I can't remember the name of the creature, the little guy. The Twain, yes. The Twain brings him back. It kind of reminded me of, have you read Hyperion by Dan Simmons? That Hyperion Cantos? Oh, it's a phenomenal series.
Ages ago, I think.
Something happens similar at the end of his 4th book with like the main person, one of the main person's main character's partner dies in this like heroic way, but then there's some time travel involved that they get to spend like 10 years together or something.
Reverse
and you're just
things,
oh man, that's awesome.
End game, happy ending moment.
Yeah. Yes. You're like, you think it's bad and then it ends up being awesome. And you're like, wow, so kind of the same thing. I was wondering what the decision was to bring Charlie back at the end of the 4th book. I think it was perfect, but I did not expect it. I was like, oh man, this is super sad. This is super sad.
I wanted to do multiple things with it. I wanted to deal with sort of the emotions and the feelings of going through letting Rook really be herself, letting her not be dependent on one person or another, letting her go through that sort of emotional process of loss and grief and have it be directed in healthy ways. But at the same time, there's enough garbage in the world. Like I love good books that end tragically. I think there's good merits in tragedies. But as a teacher, one of the things that I'm constantly fighting my peers about is that comedies have merit too. Like it's okay to read something that has a happy ending. Like you can give students the idea that when you read a book, they can end it feeling good instead of feeling miserable. Because one of the things that we as English teachers often do is we teach lots of lessons. This is a theme and this is a metaphor. And one of the lessons that we teach is that reading is painful. And that's not a good message to teach students who are just developing the ability to read. So part of my decision in that one was really just I don't think that it needs to be a tragedy in order to feel meaningful. And in fact, sometimes it can feel all the more meaningful, as I hope that one does at the end. We get that moment where it really is, I sort of cut things off just as the emotions were spiking for that, and for just that reason. Like I want it to feel like, there are plenty of books that end with that hard, like, oh, my father is dead, or, whatever. You get those hard endings, which are good and real and powerful, but it's okay to end on hope. It's okay to end on happy. It's okay to end without everybody dead. Although it's been pointed out to me since that of my main cast, all of the 4 characters who make an appearance on the covers themselves, all of them have died and returned in some way. So in completely different ways also. But I apparently like killing my characters, but I can't stick to it.
And you and George Martin, man, come on. That's funny. No, I did enjoy the ending, and I thought that it was like you're like, I mean, I'm thinking in my head of like a picture of like, oh, you have this very low feeling, and then you it's like a bittersweet end, and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh shit, that's awesome, and you go away feeling, you feel much better than, I think if you would have just ended it at that point.
I hope so. I do get a lot of comments about people sort of, I think, happily furious at me for toying with their emotions, which is exactly what I'm doing with that ending. So I'm happy to do it.
Of course, you wouldn't be a good writer if you didn't toy with some people's emotions sometimes. Oh, that's funny. Well, I mean, I really appreciate you stopping by to chat, and I've enjoyed reading your stuff. I'm looking forward to. I'll have to pick up the other series as well, because I didn't realize it was written in the same universe.
Yeah, it's middle grade rather than YA, so it's definitely it's sort of a intentionally lower level read, lower Lexile level read. I am super happy that this is my youngest's last year in that sort of age bracket. He is going from elementary to middle school right now, and so that 3rd to 5th grade bracket is the bracket that I got selected for the Oregon Battle of the Books this year. So that book gets to be in his bracket right now. I get to feel proud. His daddy's on the list. So that's super fun for me. But it is definitely a little bit younger. The characters themselves are all a little bit younger. They're about 12 going on 13 in the start of the series. So yeah, Changeling is the first in that one. Unready Queen is already out. And it's weird. This is a weird industry, because Unready Queen is out there in the world. That's the most recent book that I have published that you can purchase. And that's now 3 projects behind what I'm working on currently. Because Deepest Darkest is the 3rd book in that series, and I'm now done with it, but it will be out next summer. And then I've got another project. The only project that I've done away from Algonquin young readers is one that I did for Disney that I'm still under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't even talk about what that one is, but it's one that's super fun. But I've more or less wrapped that one. We have sort of one last round of edits to finish up. And right now what I've been working on is the next book in this. So I'm 3 books down the road telling people to go back and check out Unready Queen, which I vaguely remember writing years ago.
That's funny. Is there going to be a Jackaby movie someday?
Oh, that'd be fun. You let me know if you hear any word about it. I have a book to film agent, which is kind of fun to know that there's someone out there pitching things around. So there's no big things happening. I'm not quelling any giant rumors or anything. It would be super fun. I know that if there ever were a Jackaby or an Oddmeyer series, I would need to be not a direct huge part of it, because I love books that get adapted and the artists who take over do their own things with it, because different artists have different perspectives and they make them cool and creative in their own ways. I loved, for instance, with my kids, we read the How to Train Your Dragon books, which are super fun, and they're full of like poop and fart jokes and things like that, and they're great for younger kids reading, and they are almost nothing to do with the movie series. Like you got some of the same names, a few of the same themes, and otherwise it's pretty much completely different stories, but they took certain elements elements of the original book series that they loved and brought that up and then added their own stuff. And it's gorgeous. And I love both of them in completely different ways. And if somebody were to take over Jackaby, I hope that they would make it gorgeous and wonderful in ways that I can't even imagine now, because I'm just, one white dude sitting here in Oregon who doesn't necessarily have all the perspectives in the world.
Yeah, understandable. It's and you make a lot of good points. I'm not going to jump into all of them, but I'm with you. I think it's cool when people take something that, you were the artist on the written version, and somebody taking that source material and then creating something new and amazing and like an evolution of it. I guess that's more adapted to film than text. But all right, is there anything else that I know you talked about that new book series. You got sounds like you have some other secret projects going on that you can't talk about yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing what those are. Anything else? Any other messages or anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, y'all, stay safe. Black Lives Matter. Be kind to each other. And 2021 is just around the corner. Let's cross our fingers and knock wood and hope that it's a good one.
Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. Really appreciate you taking the time to check it out. Now, if you found any value in this episode or in any of our others, make sure and subscribe if you're watching our YouTube channel. Leave us a review on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, whichever platform. Means a lot to us, and we'll be able to reach more people with some of these fun and interesting stories and guests. So anyways, thanks for taking the time, and I will see you next time.